I can't see us being in this chapter for more than 2 weeks. So this week and next week, we'll be done with chapter 8. I think there's, 12 verses in it? Now, sometimes you can have 12 verses that are so packed you can't get through them in 3 or 4 weeks. 13 verses. Revelation chapter 8, let's start with verse 1. It said, when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. So the seventh seal opens up, and there's silence for half an hour, and then it goes into 7 trumpets. These 7 angels with 7 trumpets, and the thing starts over again. Now, I'm a little confused about how that is. It's almost like the Lord's laying it out so that John can write it down, in 4 different installments. It's like you have 4 Gospels. But it's almost like it's this linear, where he's watching it and it seals, and then boom, 7 seals, boom, starting over with these 7 trumpets. And it's a part of the 7th seal. So, in my mind, I'm not very good at visualizing things, and I'm terrible at working puzzles. So, but it's almost like he's seeing this thing is this, it's almost like a play or something. A stage is set before him. He sees it this way, and then curtain 2, act 2, or curtain opens and act 2 begins, and it's replayed with a completely different, characters or whatever. And in this case, we have 7 angels and 7 trumpets, and we're going to see what those bring. All of them have something to do with judgment. I think there's one version of this, or one account of this, deals with the Antichrist and him coming. Not a single one of them are very good, as far there's no real good news in any of it, except for they end good in that the Lord Jesus Christ comes back. So we're going through the tribulation, the Great Tribulation, for the second time, and this is going to run from chapters 8 to chapter 11. And I do think that 11 is parenthetical, but it's going to run just 3 chapters. And it says, when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And I'm not going to make the old joke. It's been made too many times about why there's silence in heaven for half an hour. Because there are no women in heaven. Anyway. Or lawyers. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe we should change it to that just to be, not to offend. And just as the gospel accounts can be overlaid on top of each other, showing you a timeline of events with exceptions, because you'll be reading through the Gospels and you'll find an account that was happened, but like on here, and it's been placed here. You'll find that in the book of Matthew. I don't know if it's throughout the other Mark and Luke, but you can find accounts that are out of sync. God does that for a purpose, and I don't have any problem with that, but these accounts can be overlaid on top of one another. Now, just as Matthew cannot lay on top of Mark exactly. Why? Because Matthew begins with the birth of Christ, and Mark begins at the baptism of John. And just as Luke cannot lay directly on top of John, because why? Because Luke begins with the birth of Christ, and John begins with the baptism. But they're all overlaid somehow, and you're seeing, because it's still the life of Christ, right? It's still this 3.5-year reality. It's just that there are these 4 different accounts, and putting it together and figuring out when everything's going to happen, because some of them sound familiar to one another, but not all of them. So I don't know. But they're just going to start. I think by the time you're in the last 3.5 years, you've got so many things happening so quick. These judgments just are happening because there's so many of them. It's not like they're going to be months apart. If anything, they're going to be weeks apart, if that. And you're going to have these things just hitting the earth at an incredible rate. To my knowledge, no one to date, now I could be wrong about this, but no one to date has created a harmony of the book of Revelation. You have a harmony of the Gospels where they'll put everything, try to put it in a chronological order. I don't think anybody's ever done it for the book of Revelation. Most of the saints don't even know there's 4 accounts. That's why they're just like, their head explodes when they read it, because it doesn't make sense from one end to the other unless you take those 4 accounts and put them together. Because it looks like the second coming of Christ happens about every 4 chapters or something, you know, and it's like, why is that happening? Why is it talking about, isn't this the middle? But you're getting 4 different accounts. Now, the silence in heaven is ominous. And some think that it's right before the second advent, but it doesn't appear that way here, unless this is not. What happens in heaven can be completely different than what's happening on earth. It's like the opening of the seals. They may be opened in heaven, but it didn't say they arrived in order. They could arrive in a different order. And just the same as these trumpets, somebody may sound the trumpet, but that doesn't mean it happened on earth at that point. So the judgment that follow, these judgments that do follow are crushing, and they are global. The question arises, in my mind, at least in my mind, is a half an hour in heaven the same as a half an hour on earth? I want to know. I want to know if a half an hour, we said, well, there's no time in heaven. Well, somehow John knows that there resides in heaven about the space of half an hour. I think he knows what a half an hour is. And he's able to approximate the passage of time in heaven. Just saying. Now, is that a half a time here on earth? Who knows? Who knows? Maybe it's longer. But it's a half an hour up in heaven. Maybe he's got a watch. Maybe he stole one from one of the saints. I don't know, you know. If he had a sundial, that would... Okay. And I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. Now, I'm trying to get this set in my mind what's happening here, but remember that Moses was given, and we'll look at that verse here in a minute, but Moses was given a pattern to follow of things that were above, things that were in heaven when he created the tabernacle and the furniture. He had a pattern to follow. Well, we're talking about those very items that he made a pattern of, or he had the pattern of and made those things. Notice it mentions there the golden, or he stood at the altar. Now, the thing about, is this the golden altar or is it the brazen altar? That's what you got to determine. And it's possible that it could be the brazen altar. Why? Because all the fire that you get for the golden altar of incense comes from the brazen altar. If there's anything going on in that temple that requires heat, it comes from the brazen altar, the 5x5 altar. I'm even wondering now if they didn't use that fire to bake the bread. That would kind of complete the furniture thing, where you've got the bread that's being baked fresh every day, that's laid out there, the 12 loaves, or 6 and 6, 12 loaves, and then you have the candlestick where the fire would come from the altar to light those, and then you have the altar of incense where they're burning the incense before the Holy of Holies, and that fire comes from that altar. So if he's referring to the altar, which there's no reason to believe there's not one up there, because he's fashioning everything according to the pattern. So another angel came and stood at the altar having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense. Now the golden censer is the portable part of the altar of incense. It was something that they hung it right there before they would enter into the Holy of Holies. And it was used to take those prayers into the holy place, or the most holy place, and bring those prayers before God. That's what the golden censer was for. And It says there that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. Then he mentions the golden altar. That is the altar of incense. It was the one that was made of gold, or at least it was overlaid with gold. So Exodus 25:9 says, according to all that I show thee after the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall ye make it. So when you're reading about those things in the Old Testament, now we get to the book of Revelation, we're literally talking about those pieces of furniture that Moses was told to make a pattern of, and we're talking about those things, where you have the golden censer, you have the golden altar, and it looks like it possibly he's talking here also about the brazen altar. Look at Exodus 37. And I learned something about prayer going through this. We'll get to it here in a second, but it never even dawned on me. I don't know why it didn't. Maybe it dawned on all of you, but Exodus 37, verse 25 to 28, and he made the incense altar of shittim wood, so it was made of wood, and the length of it was a cubit, and the breadth of it a cubit, and it was 4 square, and 2 cubits was the height of it. The horns thereof were of the same. Notice this is a lot like the altar outside, the brazen altar. It's got the 4 horns, it's 4 square, and he overlaid it with pure gold. Well, the altar, the 5x5 altar outside was brazen. It was brass. It wasn't covered in gold. And he overlaid it with pure gold, both the top of it and the sides thereof round about, and the horns of it. And he made unto it a crown of gold round about. And he made 2 rings of gold for it under the crown thereof, by the 2 corners of it, upon the 2 sides thereof, to be places for the staves to bear it withal. And he made the staves of shittim wood and overlaid them with gold. So that's how they could transport the thing around, carry it around. But we have there the thing that Moses made, that golden altar of incense. Now he mentions there that, let me see, let me read the comma there in verse 3, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And it seems that you have God's throne, and then we have all these temple items. Well, I'm just going to surmise that God's throne is in this temple, and that it's taking the place of the mercy seat. Makes sense, right? Since that's the place where God would sit. So around him are these pieces of furniture that are used for prayers. I don't know if he's going to mention anything about bread. It'd be interesting if there is what's the word I'm looking for? Table of showbread. Thank you. It'd be interesting if we see that, but I don't think we're going to be covering anything like that. But he does talk about the prayer altar, and possibly when he says just the altar there in verse 3, he stood at the altar, could refer to, I don't know for sure, could refer to the brazen altar. Revelation 7:15, it says, therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple. Makes sense that his throne is in the temple, and he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. Hebrews 8:5 says, who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. For see, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern shown to thee in the mount. So Moses just copying what the Lord showed him. And then in verse 4 and 5 it says, and the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with the fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. So you have this smoke of the incense. And of course, this is going to be a type of prayer. How many of you used to, I hate to even ask the question, how many of you used to burn incense when you were a teenager? I can just about tell you who the hands will be. Certain bell bottoms. But there used to be these little these little fat Buddhas, or sometimes it was just a big old monkey. And you would put these little triangular things and light them, and you'd have incense in your room. It was a big thing growing up. About everybody I knew burned some kind of incense, probably to cover up either cigarette smoke or dope smoke, something. Yeah. But it's interesting that prayers are likened unto the smoke of incense. But the thing that kind of surprised me when I thought about it is you smell incense. It's not so much you see the smoke, you can, but you smell. And it's like, do our prayers smell? I imagine they do. I imagine some smells come up before God and they just stink. And some prayers smell good. I don't know. But it says, the angel took the censer. Now the censer is full of the incense and filled it with fire of the altar. Now, it could be the fire right there at the golden altar. There's fire there. But it could be fire from the brazen altar. There's fire there. And he filled it with the fire of the altar and cast it into the earth, and there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. Well, remember he said about this censer that it's portable? But this is the return of your prayers. That's interesting. I never thought about the censer. You take the prayers into the presence of God. Well, now they're being flung back. And they're prayers of vengeance. And God's answering them. Notice what you've got here. Voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. You talk about breaking the silence. You had silence in there for a half an hour, man, where you could hear a pin drop, and then all of a sudden you're hearing the rumblings of God. Let me give you a couple verses, though, on prayers being like incense. Psalm 141:2. Let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. And then in the New Testament, Luke chapter 1, verse 10. And the whole multitude of the people were praying without at the time of incense. So there's just no doubt about it that what it's a picture of. Okay. I thought there was something else I wanted to say there, but I can't think of what it was now. He mentions there the prayers of the saints. Now, I imagine that if the seals have been opened and the things that happen with those are happening on earth, you got the presence of the Antichrist there, you've got wars, you've got martyrdom taking place, and a few other things that are in those seals. I imagine every believer on this planet, every believer is praying, and praying a lot. But that's not the prayers that are being referenced here that we've already covered in the book of Revelation. Look in Revelation 6, verse 9 and 10, and these are the prayers that have come up before God. It says, and when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. This is Revelation 6, verse 9. And verse 10, and they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? That's what we call an imprecatory prayer. It's a prayer of vengeance. Get them, Lord. Get them. Look what they've done to us. Get them. Well, those prayers come up before him, and the next thing you know, man, the silence is broken, and there is, let's put it this way, it is an environmental catastrophe that takes place. I think about well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go ahead and, the censer is cast into the earth, picturing the return on those prayers in verse 5. When the prayer meeting ends, that silence, hell begins. The silence is shattered by God's rumblings. And then we're going to see that verse 5 matches other verses that include an earthquake. Now, I'm not saying that all these are the same. I'm just saying that you find the same kind of wording that makes you think that there's an overlap. I'll give, for instance, in Revelation 11:13, it says the same hour was a great earthquake, and a tenth part of the city fell. But it looks like this one's more localized. And in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. Revelation 11:19 said the temple of God was opened in heaven. There was seen in his temple the ark of his testament. Well, there's another piece. Except this ark of this testament, the reason why that would be different and not would have to come from earth is because if it had the 3 testimonies inside of it, Aaron's rod that budded, the pot of manna, and the law, the tables of stone. If it had all 3 of those in it, God would need that ark, the ark of his testament. So that may be the only piece that actually comes from earth. All the rest of them were up there. And there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. But you have this earthquake going on, which is what we just read. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. And then in Revelation 16:18, it says, and there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake. Such as not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And we've talked about that one a little bit already. But so either we got a lot of earthquakes on the way, and great ones, or it's talking about a great one in several different locations in the book of Revelation, which would make sense. It's almost like, you're reading about an account in one gospel, and then the next account's like Luke chapter 5. Is that Luke 5? With Mark 5. Maniac of Gadara. There's 2 of them. Okay? You got to go to another gospel to find that out. Just overlapping, but more information. Thing is, not everything matches. Not exactly. So, verse 6 says, and the 7 angels, which had the 7 trumpets, prepared themselves to sound. And what follows this is a woke, liberal, pagan worst nightmare. I mean, it's almost like God is purposely going to trash this planet to spite these people. Because all they talk about is, the planet, and they don't care nothing about God. You know what? God can remake real estate. You do know that, right? You say, well, they would rather human beings die than to have something go extinct. I don't care if something goes extinct. If it happens to, and we don't have good management enough to save it, maybe we don't do it right, and the dumb bird or the cuckoo bird, whatever his name is, if that thing is gone for good, it's gone for good. But can God remake it? Well, of course he can. I don't see how too many things are going to survive the Great Tribulation. But there seems to be animals. He talks about them in the book of Isaiah. He talks about the wolf and the lamb and the lion and the cow. And so evidently they're critters. They're wild beasts still, but they're tamed at that point. I don't think he forgot how to bring something back. Even if he all he's got to do is preserve a male and a female, and God can do that. They say something extinct, but you really don't know till you searched everywhere. Do you know that, right? They've found things they found some things, and I can't name one offhand, but I'm sure you could chat GPT it, where they found some things they thought were extinct, but then they found them. Or they thought they were extinct and found some of them. It can happen. I think common sense is extinct, but I'm still looking for it. I think it might be gone. Let's see. Verse 7. The first angel sounded, there followed him hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon earth, and a third part of the trees was burned up, and all green grass was burned up. Now, there's only 3 people I know who make it happy about all the green grass being burned up, and that's Tyler, Priscilla, and me. If we just looked out there and saw brown, we go, it's okay. I like brown. And you too, right? But can you imagine this? Hail and fire mingled with blood. And they were cast upon earth, and the third part of the trees is burned up. A third of the trees on this planet are gone. And all green grass. Now, I think that could be over a period of 3.5 years. That could be over, it could, not only do we find that in another place that the sun gets brighter and hotter, and I think it's like 7 times hotter, but you also have a drought. Can you imagine that? Here you've got this sun acting like a supernova, and then you have a drought on top of that. There is no escape from that, man. And you know, I thought about this the other day. That rain and the former rain and the latter rain that's mentioned just before the Advent, and then you wonder why there's an invasion. It's the only place where there's water, and it's flooding there. That's wild. I mean, I know why they're headed toward Palestine. Because their drought lasts for a full 42 months. This thing happens before. This actually turns it says when he comes back, what's in front of him is like the Garden of Eden. And of course, when it's behind him, it's just, desolate wilderness where he's burned it up. But it's come back. And that may be the reason why everybody's headed to Palestine or to the land of Israel, is because that's the only place where there's water. So these plagues that follow are remarkably similar to those that Moses was empowered to call down upon Egypt. And Egypt is a type of the world. And of course, Moses is coming back, and it may be that he is the one that's calling down these plagues upon the planet. Exodus chapter 9, verse 23 to 25. It says, "And Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along upon the ground, and the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. So there was hail and fire mingled with the hail, very grievous, such that there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. And the hail smote throughout all the land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast, and the hail smote every herb of the field and brake every tree of the field." Now, when he mentions hail and fire, unless there's something supernatural going on here, there's a possibility that there's something else added along with this. Hail doesn't cause fire itself. Even if it's super cooled, it wouldn't cause fire. Now, if you pick up something super cold, like let's say you had hailstones that were made of carbon dioxide, what is that, dry ice. If you grab onto dry ice, it'll burn you. You'll get a freeze burn. But it still won't cause a fire. So there's something either supernatural going on here, or there's an element that's being added, and I'll give you a verse on that in a minute. But volcanoes produce both lightning and hail, which causes fire and destruction. I mean, look in Psalm 18:13, which is interesting. 18 is divisible by 3 sixes, and then verse 13. 18:13. And then we'll look at verse 14 also. And I'm about done for the night. We're going to quit early. It says, "The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the highest gave his voice, hailstones and coals of fire." You see what I mean? Something added to it. And I don't know what that is, man. I mean, it's almost like, a volcano spewing out, lava or whatever. But I don't know. It says, "Yea, he sent out his arrows," that's going to be lightning, "and scattered them, and he shot out lightnings and discomfited them." So maybe the arrows, I thought they were the lightning. Maybe they're not. Yea, he sent out his arrows and scattered them, and he shot out lightnings and discomfited them. So if there's lightning involved, that could be fire, create fire along the ground, or there could be these coals of fire. Anybody got an idea what that might be? Now, he rained down fire and brimstone. Where'd that brimstone come from? That's sulfur. They keep finding little balls of that stuff over there, right there in that area. They find it all the time. So where did it come from? You know, I'm sure God's got his own store of stuff if he wanted from anywhere he wants to. But let me show you a church age passage. It's kind of interesting. Look at Romans chapter 12. And look at verse 20. Try to end here on a spiritual note. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Now, anytime else you look for that heap or coals of fire on somebody's head, it's judgment. And it is here too. A lot of times we read this long. How I used to teach it was that it would, heaping coals of fire on their head, it would cause them to feel guilty. Okay? They would feel so guilty that it would just be painful to them what they've done to you or something like that. But that's really not what the passage is saying. There's two possibilities here when you love your enemies. Two possibilities. And I'm not talking about national enemies. It's talking about the people you live with, work with. It could be talking about the people in your own home. He's saying, if you'll treat your enemies like this, if you'll feed them when they're hungry, give them drink when they're thirsty, in other words, be kind to them. Two things. Two things are the result of this. One or the other. Your enemy becomes ashamed and convicted and gets saved. That's possible, right? I mean, people that you were at odds with or people that didn't like you and they let you know and hard times came and then you were the one that helped them. That might change somebody's heart, right? But then there's the other thing that if they don't. The second outcome is he hates your guts to the end, and you have compounded his judgment by your kindness. You've compounded it. In other words, what's waiting on him is far worse now because he declined your kindness and he didn't take in consideration your grace and your love toward him, and it says God will heap coals of fire on him. Just make it worse. And that's really how that works. I mean, when the Lord says, "Vengeance is mine," saith the Lord, "I will repay." If you want to make it worse for your enemy, be kind. Be kind, because you'll be making it worse on them. I mean, if you really can't stand them, you really hate them, and they're really awful to you, be kind. If they get saved, you've gained a brother. If they don't get saved, man, they are going to get what's coming to them, right? That may not be very Christian, but it works for a Baptist, I think. Jonah, yeah, it works for Jonah. Okay. I'm going to stop there. I feel like everything I've said has been backwards, upside down, turned around. Anyway, we'll get through chapter 8 by next week, or at next week. Yes, sir.